Good evening. I'm Serena Oberstein, Executive Director of Jewish World Watch. Rooted in Jewish experience and values, Jewish World Watch was founded 16 years ago when the silence about the genocide in Darfur was deafening. As an advocacy and education organization, we compel people to stand up and take action to fight mass atrocity worldwide. I want to welcome and thank you for joining us for the first panel of a four-part series on healing and wholeness, all part of Impact in Action, a month of events whereby we are coming together to maximize our collective impact in the fight against genocide. The conversations are being produced in partnership with USC Shoah Foundation, UCLA's Promise Institute, and the Center of the Study of Law and Genocide at LMU Loyola Law School to discuss the importance of preserving survivor testimony, legal accountability, reparations, and addressing trauma in the aftermath of genocide and mass atrocity. I want to thank our Global Vision sponsors, Lawrence and Jane Z. Cohen and the Goldrich Foundation. Today's panel will explore why eyewitness testimony matters in preventing genocide and as a mechanism for healing. USC Shoah Foundation, Finci-Viterbi Executive Director Stephen Smith will lead the conversation with witness and experts in the field to tackle this urgent challenge from multiple perspectives, providing opportunities for survivors to tell their stories, and then preserving those stories are the first part of this process of healing. We hope you'll join us for the entire series and the month of Impact in Action, and we hope that you'll be compelled to take action. In just a moment, you'll hear from our dynamic moderator, Dr. Stephen D. Smith, Finci-Viterbi Endowed Executive Director of the USC Shoah Foundation. Stephen is committed to making testimony of survivors of the Holocaust and of other crimes against humanity a compelling voice for education and action. An adjunct professor of religion at the University of Southern California, he's a theologian by training. Smith founded the UK Holocaust Center in England and co-founded the Aegis Trust for the prevention of crimes against humanity and genocide. He was also the inaugural chairman of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, which runs National Holocaust Memorial Day in the United Kingdom. Smith was the project director responsible for the creation of the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center in Rwanda and trustee of the South Africa Holocaust and Genocide Foundation. Smith, who holds the UNESCO chair on genocide education, lectures widely on these issues relating to his expertise. His publications include Never Again, Yet Again, a personal struggle with the Holocaust and genocide. In recognition of his work, Smith has become a member of the Order of the British Empire and received the Interfaith Gold Medallion. He also holds 2 honorary doctorates, Honorary Doctor of Letters from Nottingham Trent University and Honorary Doctor of Laws from University of Leicester. We are honored that he'll be guiding this requisite conversation this evening. Before Dr. Smith begins, we'll hear from our LA City Controller, Ron Galprin, who feels personally invested in the importance of testimony preservation and the healing for victims of genocide. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Hello, I'm Los Angeles City Controller Ron Galprin, and I am pleased to join you for this virtual event to launch the most important month of Impact in Action. It's an honor to come together with Jewish World Watch and the Shoah Foundation because the work that they do and the causes they champion are crucial and they're near and dear to my heart. This month, and all throughout the year, we must mourn the incalculable loss of lives in the Shoah and other genocides around the world. Honor and celebrate those who survived to tell their stories and those who bravely helped save the lives of others. Reflect on the lessons of injustice and remember what it continues to mean for history and to us today, and to pledge never again. This commemoration is particularly meaningful to me as my father and grandparents were survivors of the Shoah. They lived through the darkest periods in world history and lost too many of their loved ones and of their community in Romania. My mother's family escaped pogroms in Russia, leaving behind everything they knew to start anew. And while my parents had every reason to be doubtful of the human condition, they always looked to the future, even into the last of their days. Their experiences affirm the need and the ability of all of us to do good in the time that we have on this earth. I believe that if we continue to stand together and act act together and educate current and future generations about the Shoah and other generations and other genocides, we will prevail and help prevent future such genocides, bring healing to the world. More than 7 decades after the Holocaust, and despite the promises of never again, we have in fact seen it happen again and again. In Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Sudan, Myanmar, and beyond. And the world just watches. But Jewish World Watch and the Shoah Foundation have never been just watching. They take action by educating, advocating, funding, helping survivors, making sure that we never forget. So on behalf of the City of Los Angeles, thank you JWW and the Shoah Foundation for the life-changing work you do. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, the fight against genocide must continue, for the arc of the moral universe may be long, but it bends toward justice.
Well, thank you, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning for those of you who are in Europe. My name is Stephen Smith, and thank you so much, Serena, for the very warm welcome. It's a pleasure to have USC Shoah Foundation and Jewish World Watch working together in this way. And I want to pay special thanks to Lisa Hofheimer, who is the co-chair of the Next Generation Council of USC Shoah Foundation, for bringing our organizations together to give us this opportunity to share important moments together. I want to share with you just a slide now to introduce our panel, who we're going to come to in just a moment, so that we get to meet who we're going to be talking with. First of all, I'm delighted, and good morning, Nursiman Abdurrashid, who is joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to speak to us today. Nursiman is a Uyghur. She's a student and a mom, and now, unfortunately, a refugee and an activist by force of what is happening in Xinjiang province in China. We're also joined by Luis Moreno Ocampo, who's Senior Fellow at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. He's been a Fellow at USC School of Cinematic Arts, a friend of the USC Shoah Foundation, and former Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Thank you for joining us today, Luis. Freddie Picciarelli is joining us, actually not from Guatemala, where he usually is. I think he's in Virginia right now, but usually based in Guatemala City. And Freddie is the director and founder, the director of the Fundación de Antropología Forense de Guatemala, which is the forensic anthropology foundation in Guatemala that researches the crimes of the genocide in Guatemala. Martha Stroud, Dr. Martha Stroud is the Associate Director of the Center for Advanced Genocide Research at USC Shoah Foundation. She's an anthropologist who studies the genocide in East Timor and Indonesia, and he will be here to talk to us about her work today. And finally, Rais Tin Mangal. Rais is the founder and board chair of the Rohingya Human Rights Network. He's based in Canada. Thank you for joining us, Rais, and thank you for the work that you did with the Shoah Foundation in Bangladesh to ensure that the Rohingya who had just fled from Myanmar in 2017 were documented. We're looking forward to hearing from you very soon. Well, before we start, I want to turn to a recent interview. We are looking at the intersection between personal testimony and law, and nobody represents that better than 100-year-old Ben Ferenz. Ben Ferenz was prosecutor of the Einsatzgruppen trial at Nuremberg. He's the only living prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials who's alive today. And just a few weeks ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Ben for 8 hours for the Shoah Foundation's interactive program, Dimensions in Testimony. So in future, generations will be able to ask Ben questions about his life. He was a veteran, and we recognize his service today on this week of Veterans Day week. He was a war crimes trial investigator and a prosecutor, and because of all that, also an eyewitness to the atrocities of the Nazis when he went into the camps as part of the liberating troops. Ben is not with us tonight in person, but he's going to share just a few comments from his recent interview that he did for the Shoah Foundation.
So I'll be doing just the talking. I'm talking to the camera. Greetings to you all. My name is Benjamin Ferenz. I am now in my 100th year. When I came upon these reports, secret reports, indicating how many people had been killed, and I tabulated on my little adding machine over 1 million men, women, and children killed because they were Jews or gypsies or other perceived enemies of the Reich. I persuaded my commander there to put on a new trial. I said, I have here in my hand mass murder on an unparalleled scale. You can't let them go. He said, can you do it in addition to your other responsibilities of collecting evidence for the 12 trials? I said, sure. He said, then you do it. So I became the chief prosecutor of what was certainly the biggest murder trial in human history. I decided that the thing I had to do with the rest of my life was to try to prevent war making. Because in war, I saw that even people who would otherwise be decent people become mass murderers. I spent all of my time then trying to figure out how do you make it a more humane and peaceful world.
That's Ben Ferenz. So keep an eye out for that interview, which will be available sometime next year for you to be able to go and talk to Ben in person. So I want to turn first of all to Dr. Martha Stroud, who's Associate Director of the Center for Advanced Genocide Research. Thank you for being with us this evening, Martha. I know that in your daily work, you work with testimony because, of course, you are part of the Shoah Foundation team that's collecting testimony of genocides around the world. But your own work, I think, began as an anthropologist in Indonesia. Could you tell us a little bit about what your work entailed and to what extent personal histories and played into your own research and reveal what we now know about the genocide there?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm really honored to be here with these distinguished panelists. So my own research is about the mass killings that took place in Indonesia in 1965 and 1966. These are not very well-known killings. So for the sake of audience members who may not be familiar with it, over 6 months, between 500,000 and 1 million people were killed in a purge of suspected Communist Party members. And hundreds of thousands of Indonesians were also detained, put into prisons where they stayed for over a decade. The regime that carried out the killings, led by Suharto, the New Order regime, remained in power for 32 years after the killings. And they totally controlled the narrative of what had happened in 1965. People who spoke about the killings could be disappeared, and often were. And there were a myriad of forms of stigmatization introduced by the state that then entered people's daily lives and the way that they perceived each other and themselves. The photos on the screen now really represent the state of this history in Indonesia, even today. Suharto fell from power in 1998, but this is still an extremely sensitive topic, still extremely taboo, and these photos are of 2 unexcavated mass graves where the bodies of some of those 1 million victims still lie. So my own research was investigating the relation between the past and the present when it came to the killings and their aftermath. I really wanted to understand how do Indonesians navigate this history every single day in their lives now? And testimony and personal narratives is a huge part. It's of huge value when it comes to mass killings like these, where the whole conversation was controlled by the perpetrators for so many years. And I know there's a lot of parallels with other people on this panel. My own research on the killings in Indonesia really reflect what testimony in general can offer to research. It can challenge predominant narratives. It can confirm some things we know. It can change what we know. It can complicate what we know. And most importantly, it can give an opportunity to the people who experienced these horrific acts to share their stories. And it provides the opportunity for all of us to listen and to amplify their voices.
Thank you, Martha. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at genocides that are not so well known, or actually maybe still unfolding. And I think it's important work that you've been doing, Martha, there to try and bring our attention to this little known event that has profound and obviously long-reaching consequences for its victims. We'll be back to you very shortly. I'm going to turn now to Freddie Pecciarelli. Freddie, you heard there about these mass graves that are yet to be unveiled and excavated. Your work in Guatemala has been precisely about that in order to try and establish the facts of the genocide. Can you tell us a little about your work and also how testimony has now increasingly played a role in the work that you have been doing in Guatemala?
Yes, thank you, Stephen, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. In Guatemala, there was a conflict that eventually wound up in a genocide that started in 1960 and ended in 1996. And as a result, there was 200,000 victims, 160,000 of them dead, and 40,000 disappeared. What we do is listen to the families, the survivors, and search for the loved ones. Sometimes they know where they're buried, and most of the times they don't. So testimony is the central part of our work. I mean, most of what we do is try to corroborate that testimony through physical evidence. And that's what the physical evidence, when we find the remains and we can identify those remains, it gives a sense of dignity to the community members and to the people that participated and witnessed these crimes. And so although we started this process as a process of human identification, we realized that we cannot do what we do without the families at the center. And I think that's one of the most important things to understand from testimony. This is not just any other crime. This is mass crime, and we have to treat it as such. And we have to come at it from every direction, just like the families had to deal with. And that means that we have to use not only archaeology and anthropology and genetics, but testimony at the center of all that. Because without them and without their stories and without everything they saw and they lived through, we would have nothing. And what we have found is that in the process, we can dignify the families, we can identify the victims, we can return them, and we can accompany them. And now what we're doing is we're along with the USC Shoah Foundation, taking testimony and recording it and preserving it, right? So we can later use it for educational purposes. We're still dealing with the aftermaths of the genocide in Guatemala. Even though it ended more than 2 decades ago, it really has not been accepted by most of Guatemalan society or any of the governments since then. And although there has been some trials, and Guatemala is the only country in the world still that has prosecuted a former head of state for genocide in its own national courts. And we are very proud of that. However, it's very little that has really been done in reparations and in just simply bringing light to everything that happened in Guatemala.
And can I ask you, Freddie, how many cases have you opened and pursued?
We have, and we're investigating over 1,700 specific investigations. That means events, which have led us to exhume over 8,000 victims, mostly in single or mass graves. But overall, we have over 16,000 genetic profiles of family members in our DNA database. And we're continuing to build this database that you would think, nowadays, everything that we do is based on science and genetics. But again, without the testimony, we wouldn't be able to do anything. And so we have to keep reminding ourselves and making sure we also empower our investigators to make sure that everyone is at the same level, because what we have is a multidisciplinary system that works on really corroborating those testimonies.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Rais now. Rais, we got to know each other because of the crisis that came to a head in Myanmar in 2017. I'd love you to talk a little bit to the audience about the specific project that we did together in order to be able to document the Rohingya, and why that's important to you and your work in terms of promoting the human rights of Rohingya today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I volunteered, like you said, with the Shoah Foundation back in 2017 and the beginning of 2018. I traveled to the refugee camps in the aftermath of the genocidal operation that took place in 2017, burning nearly 400 villages of my people to the ground. About 750,000 people were forced to leave Myanmar and go into the refugee camps. And it's at that time that Shoah Foundation had started its documentation effort. I was very privileged to be a volunteer with the Shoah Foundation in this effort. This effort, after I left Bangladesh, I know that the Shoah Foundation continued its documentation, which is highly commendable and highly essential for criminal prosecutions that are happening or that we hope to come to realization for my people in the near future. So we know that the International Court of Justice already has got a case on Myanmar versus Gambia, and the International Criminal Court is pursuing a similar path for prosecuting the top criminals, the generals and heads of state for what it has done to my people. So work as what the Shoah Foundation did will be very instrumental in these criminal prosecutions as well. For a community like mine, I don't know if you are all aware, we do not have a written script. We do not have the sophisticated means to conduct such a comprehensive oral histories documentation. And so an organization like Shoah Foundation, when you have stepped forward and put that effort together, it is very crucial in preserving all of that history, and it will come into it will be more realized as time progresses and people get to know about it from my community as well.
Thank you. I'm going to be back to you very shortly, Race. I remember when we first spoke at that time, I see that Lee Lieberman of the Lee Lieberman Foundation is on the call today. And I remember we talked about the importance of collecting these testimonies so that one day if there were going to be tribunals or any kind of prosecution, that they would get used in this way. And I think the work that you've been doing to help promote this with the United Nations and and others that are pursuing this is very much appreciated. And I'm sure when we get to Luis Moreno Ocampo, you'll have some things to reflect on this. So we'll be back to you very shortly. I'd like to turn to Nursiman now in Istanbul. Thank you for joining us, Nursiman. We just met for the first time very recently, and you were telling me the story of your family. Maybe you would just share with our audience today the predicament that your family's in as this unfolding genocide is occurring as we speak.
Thank you very much, and it's really, I really appreciate all of you, because we talk about the genocide, and the Uyghurs now are facing genocide, and all the media talking about it, but it's past 4 years. Everything just continued the same because the Chinese communist regime they don't care what the international community say. So now, for my case, I came to Turkey in 2015 for my master's degree. And in 2017, at the end of June, I completely lost contact with my family members back home all of a sudden. And this is my family photo. It was taken in 2015 when I about to leave to Istanbul. And this is my backyard. We are such a simple and happy family. Now my father, Abdurish Tohti, and my mother, Tajgul Qadir, they are all over 50 years old. They are in the concentration camps right now. And after 2017, I completely can't contact any of my family members and my relatives and nor my friends. And these my brothers, elder brother Ahmetcan Abdurrashid and the younger brother Mehmet Ali Abdurrashid, they have children. My elder brother has 3 child. My younger brother had 2 child. Now they are in the concentration camps, and I don't know what happened to my nieces. So from my family, like we are, like my family, we are 4 child, and my parents, we are 6. Like now, me and my sister become the survivor, but my parents and my 2 brothers are suffering in the concentration camps, and I don't know the whereabouts of my nieces, and it's really hard to believe this is happening in 21st century, because all around the world people can reach the location, like people can go to the Myanmar, people can go any place to check what's happening to them, media can go, but just because the Chinese communist regime, they are not allowing any free press to go, but when they go, they just interrupt them to meet the people there, and they interrupt them to go to the locations. So it's really hard for the world to know what's really happening to the Uyghurs. But now we are living under such a hard, like now I am living here, but my parents and my friends, my neighbors are all suffering in the concentration camps and the forced labor factories, and some people, like my family members, sentenced long-term prison. Like in 2020, 15th of June, I learned it from the Chinese embassy in Turkey that my father sentenced 16 years, 11 months, and my mother sentenced 13 years. My younger brother sentenced 15 years, 11 months, and my elder brother sentenced 7 years with no crime. And as we see, there are so many testimonies like me, and there are camp survivors, and there are leaked documents about why the Chinese government arrested the peoples. And we can see the reason is very simple. For people who have relatives or the children studying abroad or living abroad, and this is enough for the Chinese government to arrest them. And for the people that, like the Uyghurs, most of the 90% of the Uyghurs are Muslim, and for them, wearing a scarf or having a for the men having a beard and go to the mosque is like performing the very simple religious act is become the crime according to the Chinese government. Like people who had prayed 10 years ago also arrested just because he was go to the mosque 10 years ago. So these very simple reasons become the excuse to sentence people such a long-term prison sentence and arrest them into concentration camps. And most importantly, the world already know about this, and now we still, like me, I am keep giving testimonies because I really don't want the world forget about the Uyghurs, forget about the 21st century genocide. But I really hope something really happen, can change the situation, and it can save the millions of people. And I really hope the listeners and the other panels help the Uyghurs, because until now, what we can do is just talk, and I really want someone who do real research about this and who do real, like, force the international community to take action. I will be really appreciate if you can do something and work with the Uyghur community. Thank you.
Nursaman, I'm going to ask you a question that somebody's just asked in the Q&A, and thank you, everybody. Please do feel free to put questions in the Q&A as we go along, and we can then just field them as we go. One attendee has asked the question, Nursaman, what can we do to help?
I'm sure there should be so many things can stop this genocide, but like it's really out of my knowledge. For me, if if people, like there is a forced labor factory, the boycott Chinese goods is the thing, can stop this. And there are like the educate people around about this genocide also help us, because the Chinese communist regime always do their propaganda and they always show the Uyghurs is the happiest people in the world, and but it's not the truth. So I really hope people around know the reality and just say no to the China, like boycotting the Chinese goods and educating people around and raising awareness can help. And we also, like, there are the database, the people working on it, and if there is a community can help and improve the recording of this kind of things, this will also help.
Thank you, Nursiman. And for those of you who are on the call, Jewish World Watch has a real focus on raising awareness of what is occurring in Xinjiang province right now to the Uyghur. So please do make sure you follow along with Jewish World Watch, because I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you things to do to make your voice heard. I'm going to turn to Luis Moreno Campo now. Luis, you've been prosecuting crimes against humanity and genocide as a career. To what extent does personal testimony play a role in the judicial process? And from what you've heard this evening from our panelists, how does what they're sharing with you square with what your experience has been listening to those who engage in genocide from a personal testimony perspective?
But Stephen, think what you ask Nursiman, what we can do. Because if in Malibu, someone steals your car, you go to the police. It's easy. You don't need someone advising what to do. You know what to do. The problem is, at the global level, there are no institutions. There are no institutions to manage the problem. That's why Nursiman is inventing solutions, because we have no institutions. But that's why I think what you were doing in Shoah is so important. The only institution is the International Criminal Court. That's the new thing. But all the cases you presented, the International Criminal Court could do nothing in China, because China is not a member of the International Criminal Court. Can do nothing in Guatemala, because Guatemala crimes were committed before 2002. Can do nothing in Indonesia, because Indonesia crimes were also before 2002. But the International Criminal Court is doing something for the Rohingya, because the prosecutor asked the judges to open the investigation. Even Myanmar is not a member of the International Criminal Court, but because people fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh. So the prosecutors say, therefore, the crime was committed in Bangladesh also. And then she's opening investigation in Bangladesh. So for all the situations you presented, the only case that could be a criminal case before International Criminal Court is the Myanmar problem, okay?
And in your experience, Luis, how does testimony play a role in these criminal proceedings, or does it not?
Oh, it's clear, no, absolutely, yeah. Most of our cases were based on testimonies. The issue is your testimonies are different. So your testimony have a different goal, because the prosecutor had to interview the victims ourselves, and we had to present the witness before the chamber, and the defense has the right to interview them. So, but what you are doing, Shoah, is building a global institution to deal with the problem. Because look, all the panelists say, I think Martha say, the victims can share the experience. And you do that. You give the victims a pace and tape them, and you record to share the experience. But in Guatemala, the victims also help to identify the bodies of those who disappear. And then you record that, and then you start to share the information. And for Rohingya, I love it when he say it's a way to preserving history, the history of the group, similar with the Yazidis. So what you are doing maybe is not testimony as evidence, but has all this other meaning. Is helping the victims, helping the community to find the bodies, helping the community to have their own history. And because there are 100 people watching this, you are creating empathy because all these people are on what's happening in the world. So basically, you are helping to build a global community of people connected and committed to help Nurisman to see how to manage her problem. So I see my answer to you, yes, testimonies are important in court, but what you are doing is really important because basically Shoah is building a global community.
I see a question from Meredith Rubensal in the Q&A, and I think it's a really interesting question about the danger of giving testimony. I remember, Rais, when we were in the refugee camp in Bangladesh, in Kutupalong, and we interviewed Imam Tzaddik, and we asked him whether he was willing to give testimony, and he said on camera, even if I die giving this testimony, I have nothing to lose. Words to that effect. I want to ask each of the panelists actually about the dangers of speaking out and the courage it takes to speak out. For those that you interviewed in the refugee camp in Bangladesh, was it dangerous for them to give testimony and for their families? And how did they find the courage in order to speak out?
They would say precisely what you have just said about the Imam. A good number of them were like, even if I am to die, I've already lost everybody. What is there for me remaining? I've lost my parents, I've lost my uncles, somebody's lost their kids. And it's very easy to say it in these few words, but it's when you are sitting and taking these interviews, which I was doing while I was volunteering with the Shoah Foundation. That is when you realize the gravity of it. You know, it's in the 10-15 minutes that they come out and say how they saw these people die. So in a sense, they have nothing to lose. It's very true. They would come outright in front and say, look, if I can just bring some justice, if I can help the people who have survived go back with dignity to their homeland, because we are here to rot in these refugee camps. The refugee camps do not exist since 2017. They have been there since the 1980s. Had my father not migrated just a year or so earlier, I would have been somebody inside the refugee camps. I would have never seen anything outside, never had an opportunity to get education. So there's nothing to lose because they have lost everything, and that gives them the courage. Of course, we have some odd who have hopes and aspirations that perhaps one day they'll be able to go back, and so they want to hold on to that possibility. But those are very rare, and so they are afraid to disclose themselves. But those are very rare. Most people are like, we have lost everything. We want to give this so that we can salvage at least what remains.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to put that clip actually of Imam Tzaddik in one of the chat boxes somewhere, so that everybody wants to watch it on the Shoah Foundation website. You can see him talking about that courage. Martha, you mentioned earlier that the government that committed the killings were in power for decades after the killings took place. So was there even any possibility for the victims to speak about their experiences without danger?
Not really. There were grassroots organizations and victims groups that started forming, especially after Suharto fell from power. And there were sort of underground communications between victims while he was still in power. But even to today, speaking about this history is a very loaded commitment. People who speak about it can be subject to surveillance, harassment. They can be arrested on some other charge, some adjacent charge. And one of the things I'm really struck by in what we're talking about here is the ways in which testimony itself can constitute a form of justice, not being a means to achieve it, but just the recording and taking of testimony itself being a form of justice that's salient to the people who've survived.
Yeah.
Yeah. Freddie, the life of a forensic anthropologist is sort of, it feels like it might replicate that of archaeology. Having been to some of the sites, it looks like an archaeological site, but it's not without its own dangers, I believe, both for you and your team and for the families. Could you talk about what you've faced in terms of just trying to unearth evidence?
Yeah, thank you again, Steve. I have to say that no matter what we face, it does not compare to what the families have to continuously face. That's really important, and especially because in a lot of these places, we have been to Bangladesh and worked in the camps in Cox's Bazar, and have been to many other places where we find the same thing, and that's that a lot of the perpetrators live and still have power in the communities where the survivors or the families live, and they have to see them on a daily basis. It's a terrible sense of impotence, and families go through retaliation, discrimination. They relive the events every time they see the perpetrators, displacement, criminalization. In our case, I mean, there were some death threats early on, and lately we have been subject to defamation campaigns and criminalization. But as one of my mentors always told me, if they're coming after us, it's because we're doing something right. So that's, for us, it's always been an inspiration to keep going, and also to remind ourselves that we are the only organization that the families rely on. And no matter how difficult it gets, it's always more difficult for them. And we have to make sure that we continue. This idea that Mr. Ocampo mentions about building global community, I love it. I'm on board. I'm here because, I believe in the Shoah Foundation and everything you do. I'm probably one of your biggest fans. And we believe in testimony. And we're also learning how the forensic work has been changed by working with the Shoah Foundation and working with testimony more and more, and learning, like Mr. Ocampo said, initially, we only thought of it in regards to identification or gathering evidence. But we now understand that it's so much more. I mean, we have, for example, this is a process led by women. So even survivors, when we interview them for, because they're looking for the loved one, when we interview them on camera, things like, rape come up that they never spoke about, especially when we're only trying to identify the loved one. So this is the process of genocide. It doesn't only kill the individuals, but it destroys the fabric of culture and society in such a way that there isn't just one thing that could rebuild it. And it's for us now about dignity and respect. And I agree with everyone here that it's a place for the families to remember their loved ones and to make sure this is set in history for everyone to understand what's happened in every one of our places, every one of our countries. Unfortunately, it's not going to stop. And this space you're giving us to talk about this is really important in the creation of a global community.
Nursiman, you're very courageous in speaking out as an individual and using your Twitter handle. I think you're at Nursiman11 or something. And please, everyone, follow Nursiman on Twitter. How did you eventually decide that you were going to speak out? Is that a risk to you and to your family? And to follow Meredith's question, does speaking out put others at risk in this situation?
Yes, of course. Like, as I said, I was learned my father and my brothers was taken in 2017, but I was speak about my family members until the end of 2018. Just 2 years, I just keep silent just because I was think this will bring some danger to my mother, because I would think she was at home. But in 2018, I learned that my mother also was taken. I don't know when she was taken, but until 2018, I would think she was at home. So I really afraid something that happened to her. So I keep silent. But when I learned that she is also taken, this thing came to my mind that I have nothing to lose. I have to speak up. And I start to talk on the media, and some people start to text me that I really afraid, and my parents also arrested but my brother was at home. I really afraid, so I can't speak on the media. There is so many Uyghurs, like some of their family members are arrested, and some of them are under the very strong surveillance control. So they choose to keep silent, and they afraid their family members, their other family members will be in danger. And there are also, like in Turkey, last week, a boy just gunshot by some unknown person. But as we know, he was forced to spy the Uyghurs in Istanbul, and his parents and his wife and his 3-year-old child are hostage in China. And the Chinese police sent him to Istanbul to spy the Uyghurs, but he refused it, and he started to talk on the media that he is not doing this because so many people killed, and he can't do anymore, because when he give any kind of information to the Chinese police, and the people get arrested. So he refused it, and he started to give testimonies. But last week, he's like, when he about to talk with BBC, and he's just gunshot, and he's in emergency right now. And there are some people still get threatened message from the Chinese police. And this is our situation. But we choose to speak about it just because we have nothing to lose. And as like compared to the suffering people in the concentration camp, and what we're seeing here is nothing. So we have to speak. This is the thing that encourages, that can like encourage us to speak and just forget about all the threats we are receiving from the Chinese Communist Party in Istanbul right now.
Thank you, Nursiman. I'm seeing a couple of questions here. Rose, we might not get to your question, but I see Rose Dosti has asked a question about the methodology in your research, Martha. But I just want to thank Rose Dosti, who's on. Rose is a was formerly incarcerated in Albania and came to me as a part of the Albanian Human Rights Foundation here in Los Angeles, and went on her own in her 80s to Albania and collected over 70 testimonies of former incarcerated prisoners of the communist regime in Albania. And Rose, I'm so pleased that we've had this long association and for all that you've done. And I'm sure that Martha will reach out and tell you more about her research personally. I want to pick up though on the question that Ellen Lang is asking about the testimony of, or the voice of, those who are not victims themselves and the role it plays. I'm going to come to you about that, Luis. You know, we've talked a lot about victims and the role that they play in giving testimony. But what about those who are not victims, who speak out or speak up or speak about the circumstance? How does that help in the process of prosecuting these crimes and in understanding the sort of advocacy that we can do around them?
Well, you need that. You need the experts, independent experts. Freddie, Clyde Snow was part of your center, because Clyde Snow was an anthropologist from Oklahoma, and he's the one who was spreading this work. He built teams in Guatemala, in Argentina. Clyde was a witness in our case in Argentina in 1985. And having an independent person coming from outside, he identified Mengele in Brazil before. So he was very well-known anthropologist forensic. So having this type of people talking is provide a different angle, because as Martha say, in the local situation, everyone is afraid. So having an objective voice talking is a different thing. And that's why your voice and the Shoah Foundation voice is really important because you put this problem in a different level.
Thank you. Well, tell us about Clyde Snow, Freddie.
Thank you, Mr. Ocampo. Yes, Clyde Snow was my mentor for over 20 years. He started his work well, after he retired twice over, he went down to Argentina in 1984, and he always told me he went down there for 2 weeks and stayed for 2 years. He was the one that started the process of including the families in a traditional forensic investigation. He broke that mold and said, no, we need the families inside, not outside, and changed everything. He started us. He taught me everything I know and don't know. And I try to follow his steps every day. And he worked all over the world and was a leader in championing families' importance in this process. And very important to the entire process. And we should all try to follow his steps.
I'm seeing a comment here from Elizabeth Nicolosi about Roman Kent, who is a board member actually of USC Shoah Foundation and much beloved. And he said, as Elizabeth is reminding us, if you're not indifferent, things can be different. That's one of his quotes. And the 11th commandment, thou shalt not be a bystander. Rais, as you think about the testimonies that we took, now finding their way into these pre-investigations, what is your hope for how those testimonies can be used for justice for the Rohingya?
I would like to see the people who gave their testimonies with all their courage to the Shoah Foundation's oral histories, that the UN International Independent Fact-Finding Mission look at them and select those that they find compelling to go and ask again for a criminal prosecution, criminal prosecution investigation interview that they would like to do for their preliminary proceedings at a national criminal court. I would like them to go and dig out those testimonies, go through them line by line, and then connect with these survivors. I can help reconnect them because we did some of the initial surveys, as you know, Steve, and they could utilize those portals to present them at a criminal prosecution, which we hope to happen at the International Criminal Court.
Well, we have a special guest. I was going to close this program today by returning to the Holocaust where we started to introduce interactive testimony with Pinchas Gutter. But for those of you who follow the Shoah Foundation, you're going to have to wait for that, because I see that on our participant list this evening is the real Pinchas Gutter. So we don't need a hologram when we have the real person. So if you can spotlight Pinchas, if you're there, Pinchas, we would love to say hello to you in person. And I have a question for you. Where's he gone? He was there a minute ago. So, and if not, we're going to go back to the hologram, which is fine.
The hologram.
We have both, so it's either's fine. If we find him in a second, he's dropped off. Okay, I'm going to ask my colleague, Kia Hayes, if she'll come and join us for a second and perhaps introduce us to Pinchas Gutter, now the hologram version. And we want to ask him a couple of questions about genocide as we close out this session.
I am here. I was muted.
Oh, you're there. Come here.
I am there, but I was muted. You muted me, so I couldn't speak. Now I'm unmuted.
There you go. So, Pinchas Gutter, have we got you on video? There you go.
Yeah, there I am.
There you are. We nearly had to settle for your hologram. That would have been terrible. So Pinchas, as you listen to our panelists today talking about genocide around the world, and as you hear about Nursiman and the fact that she's going through this right now as a family member, what would you have to say to Nursiman and our panelists this evening?
Well, I want to tell you something, that when I hear that kind of testimony, it just breaks my heart, because I really feel the pain of another human being that I went through when I was a boy of between the ages of 8 and 11, when I was being, persecuted by the Nazis, and that this should continue to go on and on and on and on. I cannot understand it. Why? Why is it? Why shouldn't people, in China, be able to continue with their faith, with their religion? Why should they be persecuted? These are ordinary human beings. They're not a threat to the huge Chinese economy. They're not a threat to this enormous Chinese government and their forces. They're just ordinary, simple people, just like we were in Łódź and Warsaw before the war. We were poor people. We worked hard and we made a living, and the Nazis came and destroyed our whole community. I mean, I lost close to 150 members of my family, and of course I lost my father, mother, and sister, and I was left alone in concentration camps. And I just feel that so important that the world, you heard me speak at the United Nations when I said to these august ambassadors to tell them, do something about this. And nobody seems to listen. No. Why can't they listen and do something about it?
Luis, why don't the authorities? Luis, why is it so difficult that? I'm going to ask Luis. Luis, why is it so difficult to get things done at this high level in organizations like the UN?
It's a problem of design. It's a matter of design. The world is organized about national states. And the principle is no national state can intervene in China, just China. As you don't like ICC investigating American soldiers in Afghanistan. So it's not a matter of leadership. It's not a matter that Pinker was not charismatic enough. He's very charismatic, but you're asking people who have the task to work on the national level. And in the 21st century, we need to go beyond the national level. We have to go to the global level. What could be the solution at the global level? And in the meantime, ICC was created. That was a miracle. But in the meantime, Shoah Foundation is filling a gap there, because you are filling a gap, sharing information, creating a global community on this topic. And that is the way to do it. It will take time. We are not yet there. But the Nursiman generation need that to avoid what happened with Pinker generation. So we need to move from the national system to the global system. That's the next challenge. There are no political institutions at the global level. UN is just a place for meetings. They're not independent.
So final question, Pinkas, for you. Final question. After it's 82 years since Kristallnacht, the November pogrom took place. It's over 75 years since you survived the Holocaust. At this point in your life, looking at all of these scenarios that we just talked about just now, do you have hope for the world in which we live?
I always have hope, because I think human beings are absolutely both morally, majority of us are both morally and spiritually human people that are actually ordinary. I find it difficult, to even express myself about it. But the fact is that the resilience of humanity, of human individuals, majority of us are just ordinary good people. All we want is to have a family, a piece of bread, and a little bit of enjoyment, and just allow us to live peacefully. And I don't believe that the world will go on. The world is actually getting a bit better since I was liberated in 1945. You take, for example, with the Syrian refugees, Canada has taken in approximately 40,000 Syrian refugees. A lot of people sponsored, families sponsored Syrian refugees, and the government brought in Syrian refugees. Can you imagine what would have happened in the 30s when the Jews were trying to get out of Europe? when the Nazis started, persecuting, nobody wanted us. Nobody wanted to let you in. The countries were just closed all their doors. But now things but I've said this time and time again, things are improving minusculely, but slowly they do. And the world is going to last a long time, no? They know when eventually it will disappear, but when God wants us to do it. But in the meantime, it's getting better slowly. And at the work that the Shoah Foundation is doing, and all these people that I listened to tonight, what they are doing, they can only make this place a better world.
Pinchas Gutta, thank you so much. Luis Moreno Campo, thank you for being with us. Rice, Tin Maung, thank you. Freddie Pacciarelli, thank you. Martha Stroud, thank you. And Nurisman Abdurrashid, you got some new friends this evening. We're going to stand with you. We're going to speak for you and be there in this time for you and your family. We're praying for them for a safe return soon. And tomorrow is Veterans Day. And as we think about the fact that Pinchas Gutta was liberated by Russian troops in May of 1945, tomorrow I'll be on with American liberator, Shoah Foundation, Alan Moskin, talking about the liberation of Gunskirk and to thank him for his service. So please join us for that. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Serena Oberstein. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. What an incredibly compelling conversation. And I think we're all feeling inspired and moved and sad. And so I think, we said this at the beginning of the panel, that the first step is preserving testimony. It's listening to people. And the next step is taking action. So we put some links in the chat. And there are two things that I would ask you to go and do right now. There is a bipartisan bill in the Senate recognizing what's happening, the human rights abuses to the Uyghurs as genocide. Call your senators, click on that link, and you can send a letter immediately, but call your senators and demand that they sign on and that they recognize what's happening to the Uyghurs. And also you can visit our website. We're taking action and partnering with communities on the ground in Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar to make sure that the Rohingya in the camps are getting things that they need, like COVID response, like housing during monsoon season. It's important to listen, but now we have to take action. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Stephen and to the Shoah Foundation for being an incredible partner and for kicking off this first conversation. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.